Welcome to Hoots Hacks, your go-to podcast for everything security and compliance. I'm your host, Brad, Digital Marketing Specialist at Cognisys, and joining me as a co-host today is Naomi Horton, our Client Care Specialist.
Hi, I'm Naomi, and today's guest is one of my clients, Matt Willman, who is a CTO of Liaison Group. I've worked quite closely with Matt on his vulnerability management journey so far, and we're going to break that down bit by bit today. So let's get into it.
Hi, we're joined by Matthew Willman, the CTO of Liaison Group. How are you doing? Start off with how are you?
Good. Thoroughly enjoying it. For those that are catching up on this at some other point, it's just got really cold in England. We've had some snow, and I've discovered that I have my own vulnerability with a boiler at home that doesn't work all the time. But so there's personal vulnerabilities as well as what we're going to discuss over the next few minutes, hours, days.
Yeah, it's also the Baltic sides. But tell us a bit about Liaison Group then. So who are you, what you do, what's the core mission behind Liaison Group?
Okay, so Liaison Group is about 300 or 400 people. We've been working with the NHS now for over 30 years. Our core mission, as you can probably see on the back of the screen, is changing the global health economy, helping, in effect, the NHS in the UK to be more financially effective. They obviously have a lot of money, don't always find the best ways of spending it, and we help them not just identifying areas where they can save costs or reduce costs, but also in different ways that they can operate. They can be more process efficient. And I think the most important thing that people should take about Liaison Group is we don't just come up with ideas, we actually execute on them. So our core model is very much based on if we identify something for a client and it gets achieved, that's the point at which we realize income for our business. So we don't just provide advice, we provide advice that's actioned, realized, measured, and delivered. So it makes a difference. We save the NHS multiple hundreds of millions of pounds a year that is better invested in frontline support and efficiencies.
Amazing, yeah. And how long have you actually been with Liaison then?
Roughly 13 years. Roughly.
Incredible.
Back in 2011. Number of different hats during the course of the organisation. We've grown from 30 odd people back in 2011 to about 360 people now in 2024. Revenues have changed from 7-8 million to 35-40 million. So it's gone through a lot of growth over the last couple of years, last 10 years. And we've also, I think importantly, branched out into different aspects of how we help the NHS. It started very much in the financial department, but then it moved into more people management, and now we're moving more into patient support programs. So it's constantly evolving. I think we're small enough to adapt, but we're large enough to deliver.
Oh, it's a good quote, isn't it?
I like it.
Take that off my post-it list. No, it is. But it is actually really important. I think as an organisation, being a privately owned organisation, we're still in a position where we're able to concentrate on not necessarily niche areas, but we're able to kind of look at areas and invest some time and effort. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And not every organisation gets to try and fail as well as try and succeed.
I want to jump into vulnerability management. Obviously, that's been a big part of our partnership together. So kicking off, can you describe the initial challenges that you face with vulnerabilities across your IT assets? Just give us the starting point of that journey.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. It's an interesting one because when he asked me a question about, how can I describe the challenges I faced in managing vulnerability, I didn't know we had any. So it's my first challenge. I didn't understand or appreciate the level of vulnerability that actually existed within our estate or our infrastructure. You work on the basis that you put a lot of protective measures in place. You tell people not to do things. You put training in place. And you work with Microsoft, so our infrastructure is all managed with Microsoft Azure. So you think, we're working with pretty solid partners here. We're kind of okay. We encrypt our laptops. We tell people not to install things. So I think that the biggest challenge was ignorance. I didn't appreciate what actual vulnerabilities, how they accumulated, where they came from, how you could identify them. And as soon as we started, because we used originally worked with Cognisys on the basis of penetration testing, cyber essentials, the stuff that we thought would give us some indication of whether or not we had any risks. That's fine from a global view, but it doesn't get down to individual devices. Cyber Essentials obviously does. Cyber Essentials Plus takes it a bit further. But when we dug that next step down, looking at, okay, let's look at individual pieces of software. Let's look at whether or not they're presenting any issues. Are they up to date? Have they been refreshed? Who's installed what? Suddenly the biggest challenge was, well, there are a lot of moles popping up. I know I've used this phrase before, but when you start playing whack-a-mole, you start realizing that you have a lot more moles than you can whack just by standard business operation. You need some way of identifying, prioritizing, actioning, and trying to stop them from constantly popping up. So, Brad, to answer your question, I think the biggest challenge we faced was that level of not knowing what level of vulnerabilities we had and how they were getting into our estate. And that sounds as if people were introducing vulnerabilities and we're running at risk. Actually, no, they just evolve, because if you don't update software or you don't patch something, and people aren't resetting their laptops, vulnerabilities creep in because you've got an old version of a library somewhere. Well, that may be because somebody's not used that software for 6 months. And if they haven't opened it up, it may not have updated. You go, okay. And you start to learn as you go through this that it's not, the majority is not user driven. We haven't had our users introducing risks into our estate. It's more user maintenance, keeping themselves up to date, managing their assets. And that's the process we've kind of gone through, and we're still going through in terms of what's the most effective way of doing that. So biggest challenge, was not knowing how big the challenge was.
Great. I think something that I wanted to mention was, obviously you've been with Cognisys for a while now, but I've only been managing you for around a year or so. But I've seen personally a big dramatic changing from where you started. Because obviously it's my job to keep checking your tenant, keep checking everything. And from day one, looking back then to where you are now has been a big, massive change. So I think that kind of leads me into my first question, which would be, how has SmartScan kind of changed your approach to vulnerability detection and management, and how has it helped you in that way?
I guess going back to the first question that Brad asked is, what's the biggest challenge? Well, if you don't really know what your vulnerabilities are, you don't really know what you should do about them or how they're originating. You don't know which ones are important, which ones are going to be a risk. So when we started scanning the estate with SmartScan and put the tracking on all the devices, I think SmartScan started to gather us sufficient information to go, oh, look, you have risks. Okay, we have hundreds, if not thousands of risks, across an estate of 400 or 500 pieces of hardware with endpoints. You kind of go, oh, didn't appreciate that. So SmartScan gave us that first enlightenment. It was the first kind of, there are a lot, and we didn't know. Okay, then you've got to go, okay, but I can't deal with an entire field full of moles. This is ridiculous. Let's prioritize them. I think SmartScan gave us the opportunity to go, how many devices infected with, or not infected, but have these kind of vulnerabilities? Which ones really present a risk? Let's group them, let's prioritize them, and then let's start seeing how did they get there? Can we tackle them? Is it a simple case of just forcing everybody to reboot their machine or whatever it might be? So SmartScan gave us the insight to go, that's the size of the problem. And then it gave us the prioritization that said that's critical, that's high priority, this kind of stuff. And then we started working through how do we tackle them. And then it started, I suppose a few months in, you start realizing that actually it doesn't matter if you shoot one, 3 appear. It's a constant evolution. This isn't a one-time shot. You don't suddenly fix your estate and don't have vulnerability. So I think SmartScan was also quite useful in terms of there's your starting point. Oh, there's a lot you need to deal with. And by the way, you've shot a few, but look over here, a few new ones have appeared. So SmartScan was live and still is live, isn't it? I mean, it picks up vulnerabilities that are appearing every day and looks for them across the estate, out-of-date software, out-of-date libraries, whatever it might be. So I think it changed our approach from blissful ignorance of, that's fine, we're okay, we've got protection around the outer markers, to somewhat worried awareness, because we haven't had major vulnerabilities in the estate. We have a whole volume of them. So I think SmartScan has changed the approach from not really doing anything other than patching and updates and pushing out security fixes to machines and forcing people to reboot every so often, to actually diving down to the next level and going, this isn't just about Windows updates. This isn't just about Office updates. This is about, there's a whole range of software on laptops and endpoints that needs to be looked after and kept an eye on, because every one of it produces or presents potentially an access point for somebody who wants to try to get into your network or get into your data or something. Now, we're lucky we're not a direct target at the moment, which is fine, but I don't want to be in the position where you go, why didn't everybody update X bit of software or Y bit of software? Because so I think that's how it's changed our approach from blissful ignorance to knowing an awful lot more and then taking the associated actions.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, then. So, like you mentioned, then when you said that it's helped you like prioritize and triage everything, your vulnerabilities and all your results. What advice then would you give to IT professionals that are tearing their hair out, trying to remediate all the vulnerabilities at once? What advice would you give them?
Don't try to remediate all at once. There's a priority. Well, first off, run a scan. See what actually exists within your estate, because you will find that you've got critical, vulnerable, high, medium, low, and you will have, depending on the number of endpoints, you will have hundreds or thousands of, identified vulnerabilities. You've got to put them in some semblance of order. Now, whether that is based on their criticality and likelihood of being exploited, for us, we kind of took a view that went, oh, there are so many, what can we do to at least bring the number down? That was our starting point. Took a couple of months running at that particular exercise and realized that we didn't have enough hammers to hit moles. So this is crazy. We really need to concentrate our efforts on the critical, the exploitable, the ones that are live and that are identified as potentially being used by bad actors, and the high. So you ended up probably with 20 or 30% of the vulnerabilities as your target. And then within that, you kind of go, right, now, how many people, how many endpoints are affected by this vulnerability? So is it a critical? Is it affecting one person? Phone them up, do something about it straight off. Is it affecting 50 people? Whoa, create a program, push it out, try to get it resolved. So you're unlikely to have a very small pot of vulnerabilities. You're unlikely, but you really do need to focus on the critical, the exploitable, and the high. And you need to keep an eye on that. And that is a constant rolling activity, because tomorrow there will be another exploitable one that appears that gets flagged because somebody goes, that hasn't been updated for 3 months. That's not where somebody's having to play. So it's not a one-time wonder. Now, the stuff that's medium and low is still sitting there bubbling, and every so often we'll pick them off and clear them out. But with a mass update or a patch, or tell people to stop using software or something. So I think it is prioritize based on risk.
I've got to say as well, Matt, I think I can speak for many people here. We do love your whack-a-mole analogy. And I think for me, starting my cybersecurity journey about a year and a bit ago, it definitely helped me to understand vulnerability management a bit more. But I think it's a perfect analogy to describe like that. It can be quite chaotic, like trying to remediate all these issues of one. More of them will pop up. But yeah, no, I think it's a great way to describe it for sure.
Hey, this is not the most complicated thing in the world. If we can relate to something, then we can often find solutions we already know that we apply elsewhere. Yeah, so we wouldn't have necessarily kept this, but if you have problems at home or in general life, the way you go about solving those is the way you go about solving business problems. Think about it. This is what the risk is. Prioritize it and deal with it. Yeah, and that's how you need to categorize these things. Otherwise, we can overcomplicate. If you over-engineer a solution that says, what I need to do is now write a whole set of programs so that I can go after this particular vulnerability, you'll have an IT department and a support group who are constantly writing scripts that they want to push out to people. No, sometimes you've just got to sit back and go, right, that one's an issue. We'll phone everybody up individually and get rid of it. Just be practical. And you will find that the numbers will start to get under more control, and then have a regular process of sitting down, reviewing, and making sure that you keep the numbers under control. Yeah. So it is. It's just make it relatable, and then make it a bit fun. Really, if you're whacking moles, it makes it a lot easier for people to go, yeah, it's not a vulnerability without, this particular KYXYZ code. No, it's a mole, hit it.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. So
unless we're friends of the mole society, in which case I apologise.
Yeah, then. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, maybe not. Do you find that like regular compliance, like adhering to Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus and frameworks like that? Do you think that helps to stay on top of your vulnerabilities that way as well? Because that's kind of always maybe in your mind coming up to it.
I think it's always a consideration. So as an organization, we want to ensure that we look after our customers' data, we look after our own commercial data, we keep it in safe and secure environments, we do all the encryption, all this kind of stuff. We do penetration testing with you guys, actually, so that you check authenticated and unauthenticated access to our environment and applications. And we do all that because we take security seriously. Okay. Now, that's fine because that puts all the walls around our organization. And we do the Cyber Essentials because we want to have a third party validate that the work we're doing with vulnerability management actually is helping. But Cyber Essentials also means that you keep up to date. So it's about making sure that you're running the latest version of software or operating systems or whatever it might be. So I think, as I said at the beginning, it's important that it's a whole package. You're not just looking, I don't care about our security or our firewalls or anything like that. Yeah, we do, and we think we're safe on this particular front, but there's still stuff that's in your house that you could do with tidying up. So I think you kind of have to package it together. It would be daft to go, right, I'm going to go on a vulnerability management run, because that's our most important thing to do. But I'm not going to worry about keeping my antivirus software up to date, or I'm not going to keep the operating systems patched. Then they'll come together. I mean, we've got an entire world called Microsoft who are continually putting out security updates and patches. Take those, apply them, and then have a look at other things that you can do. So it's a suite of activity. It's not just in isolation. And I think if you do your Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, I think actually validates it. I think Cyber Essentials is probably quite weak if people, really want to just tick the boxes, get a certificate, and potentially not really address things. I think the Cyber Essentials Plus gives you that not comfort, but confidence that somebody else has taken a look and gone, do you know what you have? Of your estate, we've sampled this. It is actually exactly what you're saying. So it's true. And the penetration testing just allows us to have that, if you like, oversight of what we think is okay. Because we put a lot of trust in Microsoft and security and all that kind of good stuff. It's nice to just go, yeah, this one's a bit out of date. That one could do with updating. No, we couldn't get into your systems without authentication. Those are nice things to have. It's a sweet, Brad. You've got to do the package, and it doesn't matter who you do it with. Just don't think that, today I'm going to do vulnerabilities. No, today I need to have done the Microsoft patch, and maybe we'll look at some of the critical vulnerabilities.
Okay, then a bit of a side swerve. Then, what, in terms of yourself, what valuable lessons have you learned since actually starting your cybersecurity journey with us?
It's a lot longer. It's a lot longer journey than I thought it was going to be. This is great. I mean, we probably, the journey that Liaison have been on with Cognisys started 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, and it started very much on the penetration testing. We need a CREST certified organization that can do some external penetration testing that we can show to our clients that says, look, we take security seriously. We do this. We get a third party check. Beautiful. Cyber Essentials has always been a tick box exercise, and then we went, this is nuts. You can get away without actually doing anything. You can just say you have it, and that's not right. If you're going to do something, do it properly. The Cyber Essentials Plus means it's going to be audited. It means it's going to be checked and validated again. And this is good. And this is the early part of our journey, first 3 or 4 years. And then we kind of went vulnerabilities, and I think you guys partnered up with Prism and Smart Scan, all this stuff came into play, and we started having a conversation about, here is a whole sector of the market where, things exist within estates that people are potentially not keeping an eye on. And there are probably lots of companies that do these things and will come up with ideas. And I think Microsoft have even got their own set of management reports that you can identify in your estate, certain things. But it's not about the tool. It's about the partnership. It's about how do you actually go, I'm going to monitor something and then we're going to do something. Because get really bored with lots of people going, I put agents all over your estate and look, they've got 1,000 things they've identified. Yeah, great. And we've prioritized them and we think these should be resolved. There's an SLA on these and these are the important ones. Right? That's good.
Yeah.
Yes, we now know a lot. And actually the most important thing is through our partnership and also with Impact IT, who are our IT support company. What we've done is we've gone, okay, knowledge is one thing. Action is much more important. We need to honestly have a way of remediating these vulnerabilities, tackling them. And I think the thing that I've probably learned most during this journey is that you can do all the scanning, you can do all the prioritization, you can miss SLAs, you can monitor SLAs, you can have information you do understand, you don't understand. It doesn't make a lot of difference. That all forms the basis for doing something. And the doing something is then lining people up to go, right, okay, how do we put out a patch? How do we do an update? How do we stop users from introducing old software? So there's a number of things we've done through this last year and a half, 2 years. So we've removed all admin rights from all laptops, so nobody can install any further software. It does slow some people down when they have to go for updating software, but that's fine. It's fine. We can help them with that. And we've worked closely with Impact IT so that they allocate resource on a weekly basis, literally to go through the prioritization list and go, right, send out a patch, do this, do that, email these people, do things. I think the journey is, first step is into the unknown, where you have a massive set of vulnerabilities. The second step is you suddenly realize you're in a field full of moles. The third step is you prioritize them. And the fourth step is you've got to whack them. Otherwise, if you don't do the fourth step, forget it. It was all fun. You spent money and you've invested in software and you've invested in monitoring. If you don't do the fourth step, there was no point doing the first three.
Exactly.
It was irrelevant. And for us doing the fourth step, combined with the penetration testing, cyber essentials, and all the other stuff we do, I think just made us feel more confident that we're putting up slightly stronger internal barriers as well as external barriers. So, and the journey is non-ending, by the way. So I think when you talk about a cyber security journey, just because you've killed one mole, there's another 3 waiting in the queue somewhere. Because some people around the world have got nothing better to do than figure out how they can get into systems and exploit them, and there's a whole world that does that.
Ongoing process of that.
Yeah, it's a forever. And it evolves because you then find different ways of identifying, you then find different ways of prioritizing, you find different ways of actioning them. We're probably thinking a little bit about, at the moment, we're doing a lot of endpoint management. So we've got 300 or 400 endpoints. Looking at how do we keep those as secure as possible. I mean, I can't do anything about the carbon interface, the human interface, and we can do training around that in terms of telling them to look out for things. But there is a thought process that's running at the moment, and I don't know how this will change over the next 12 or 18 months. But if you revert all of your endpoints to, for example, as your virtual desktops, then you remove a lot of the potential risks sitting on the hardware, on installed software. So, because we've identified that it is a continuous journey and there is a field of moles and they continue to arrive, how can we potentially reduce the complete risk across the estate by changing the way the estate operates? So the typical operating model is you have a piece of hardware, software installed on it, you operate. Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, the old ways of going back to virtual desktops and managing everything have probably moved on a bit, and could be a way of tackling that field full of moles by removing a lot of the field. Actually, we will see.
Yeah, I liked what you said as well about it's more than just the one step process. You got to prioritize, but then most importantly, you've got to whack them or you got to remediate. Because it's almost like preparing for an exam, isn't it? And just not doing the exam, like you need to do the prep, but then also follow through. So, I think it's important, I guess, for people to know the journey ahead and what needs to be done for sure.
And making sure that you don't suddenly go, oh, we won't do it this week or we won't do it this month.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. You'll just come back to it and go, I mean, if you want to do it every 3 months or so, you're just going to pull your hair out every 3 months going, well, I can't even remember which ones we were dealing with 3 months ago, and now look at all the rest of them. Yeah. So it's keep your eye on it.
I want to ask as well, like Liaison Group, and obviously you manage security across a bunch of different sectors, like healthcare and public sector. where data protection is critical. What makes it so critical for you guys to maintain that, across these different sectors? And is there challenges that come with that as well, working across different sectors and managing security?
There are, but we take security as a business is just security as a business. So it's at a high level regardless of what we're dealing with or who we're dealing with. So from our early evolution, we used to just deal with financial data, numbers and stuff. It wasn't really overly sensitive. If somebody wanted to steal all that data, what would you do with it? How much an NHS trust spent on window cleaning or taxing? It's really not going to make a great deal of difference. That's an extreme example. So in the early days, when you're dealing with that sort of information, you're not really too worried about security. I mean, you are, but actually, what's the downside if somebody came and grabbed a file with 1,000 transactions in it that added up to £1 million? You want to keep an eye on it, but you're not panicking if somebody was to steal it. The level of risk. However, that doesn't mean we're complacent. We always keep it secure. We always keep it encrypted. We always keep it passworded. Obviously, all the basics. But as the organisation over the last 10 years has transitioned more into dealing with people information, and whether that's resources that work, doctors, temporary doctors, bank doctors, names of people who are actually delivering services in the NHS, that's now become a little bit more personal. We're not doing sensitive data. We're not going into areas of too much risk. But at the same point, if somebody's going to entrust you with holding data that's personal, you do have to put a lot more rules around it. You have to make sure that if you've got test environments, it's all encrypted and anonymized so that people can't, actually using the data for anything. So it's anonymized. You have to make sure it's encrypted in transit. You have to make sure it's securely accessed. You just have to be more aware that the value of that data that's in your application or in your systems now has now become a little bit more valuable to external parties. Again, the level of risk, if somebody was to find out the name of a doctor who worked at a hospital, it's not wildly sensitive. And what can you do with it to exploit it? Not a great deal. It doesn't have resale value. And I'm just looking at this from the risk vectors at the moment. But in the last 3 or 4 years, we've started dealing with more patient information. Okay, so we've started looking at patient cases. We've been looking at whether or not they're on the right programs. That now suddenly goes from what was financial to personal to patient. So 3 or 4 years ago, we kind of went into that bracket of let us do some third-party assessments of whether or not you're providing the right care packages for the right patients. That means getting information from a patient, information about medical conditions and situations, assessing it with a qualified clinician. But holding that information in our environment, which means our walls around the outside have to be more secure. Our level of access internally has to be more restricted. Our level of encryption and restrictions and authorization as to who accesses it, our management of what we delete and when we delete it, the security of how we receive it, how we access it, all has to be tightened up even further. So I think what's important to me is that when we work in the healthcare sector, if you're dealing with financial information and staff information and then patient information, you really have to be whiter than white. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is why, throughout all this conversation, we're not doing vulnerabilities just because it's a fun thing to do. No. We're doing vulnerabilities because they potentially present a risk of somebody accessing our environment and potentially accessing our customers' data. And we don't want that. And the reason we work with Microsoft Azure, we put all the outer fences in place, is because we don't want people getting there unless they've been authorized to do so. And that's why we do the penetration testing with you to validate that people can't. So I think it's interesting. So that's what we do. And we do that because the level of information we hold is important. Now, to some extent, we're quite lucky that we're not and I guess when this podcast goes across the world, we'll suddenly become a bit more of a target. But actually, we're not the access point for information that people want to do. If you want to break into a hospital because you'll access everything. I think, and that's happened over the last, I can't remember, 6 or 9 months. There was a hospital down there.
Yeah, it was.
So the targets really are our customers. So what we do is we make it really hard for us to become an attractive place to go and look for information. So if you want to come and look for information that we're holding on behalf of the NHS, you can come and look, but you can't get in, you can't access stuff. And it's encrypted. And actually, we're assessing it and analysing it and then providing recommendations. Yeah, we're not changing it, we're not updating it, we're not the master copy of the data.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we're not the master version, we are a copy. That's a better way.
I know you mentioned as well, because healthcare has taken quite a lot of hits this year, I think, in terms of cybersecurity and threat actors trying to get into it, especially ransomware gangs actively targeting a lot of the healthcare sector. Has that presented any challenges to you guys, or do you feel like you guys have adapted to prevent that sort of thing from happening?
I think we've we're continually adapting and putting additional measures in place to secure our environment. You never know if you've been lucky or preemptive. So we've been very strong on our cybersecurity. So doing things like penetration testing, all the stuff when we're developing our applications, they're secure by design, they're tested. We use another company called AppCheck, who provide us with similar vulnerabilities in code writing for software. I think, to answer your question, we probably continue to be as secure as we can and put all the pieces in place to make us, not an overly attractive target for bad actors. We're copy of data, we're not master data. We haven't got everything that people want. We don't have all medical records and all this kind of stuff. There's not a great deal of value, even if you got into our environment. But we make it really hard. So I think the most important thing is that we continue to make sure that whatever is shared with us from our customers, we look after, we limit access, we limit use, and then we get rid of once we don't need it anymore, which means we are literally processing it for a period of time, keeping it protected, and then we've done our part of the equation. And I think we haven't been affected, touch wood, luckily, by some of the NHS organisations that have had the ransomware attacks, or their computer systems have been out of date, or records have been locked or hidden away, because we don't deal with the primary records. Yeah, we get given a copy of stuff to look at, view, then return and delete. So I think we've been, I'll go with lucky or preemptive, but sometimes it's better to be lucky.
So that reaches the end of the podcast, but I'm interested in anything you want to plug for Liaison Group, or anything you'd like to shout about that you guys are doing that's quite special at the moment.
I think there's a few things that are probably of interest, and I'll come on to those in a second. I think just closing the loop on vulnerability management. Okay. We've worked with you guys for the last 3 or 4 years on vulnerabilities.
Yep.
As you say, Naomi, we've kind of had the last year and a half where we've started to see that progress. Well, there's continual progress of control, which is great.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing for me is, if anybody did listen to all this podcast, and you can go back about 10 minutes, if you think about point 4, doing it, actioning something, don't be afraid, and I know Cognisys will kill me for this, but don't be afraid to look at other options in the marketplace, because there are other tools that will help you manage an estate. So we're also looking at one that allows identification and remediation. The Smart Scan platform does a lot of the identification, and that's great because it identifies and prioritizes, tell you which moles you've got in a field. You really need to find something that helps you work on the step 4, the whacking the moles.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you try to do it manually, you will just run out of energy. Okay. So you do need to find something that allows you. And I am absolutely convinced that over the coming years, and it's obviously the buzzword of the year in the last few years, AI will start to be able to identify issues across estates. It will identify and remediate. It will identify, prioritize, and remediate, all in simple processes. It just says, I'm just going to tell you, you had this issue, we've got rid of it for you.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think this sector is going to continually evolve. I think there'll be a whole plethora of new technical solutions that allow that to happen for customers like us. And I'd just keep an eye on it. Keep your eyes open to who's trying to solve stuff. So that's what I'd say. It's constantly evolving, and I think the tools will constantly evolve as well. Okay, and I guess the only other thing that I'm excited about from a liaison group perspective at the moment is we are going into next year working closely with the NHS, looking at how we can provide more staffing support. We've literally this year started an emeritus program with NHS England, which is with retired doctors. As we go into next year, we're then looking to expand that into a national bank of retirees. People who've left the NHS who are quite happy putting their feet up, but might be quite happy on a Tuesday afternoon doing 2 or 3 hours worth of remote consultancy and assessments. I think it's a great opportunity to try and bring down some of the backlog. At the end of the day, and I said it, if you can relate to what happens in your real life, we as an organisation are looking realistically at the NHS and going, they don't have enough money, they don't have enough staff, and we all suffer. More often than not, we can't get through to GPs. That's being addressed. Phone systems and volumes, but more often than not, you then can't see people in the NHS because they don't have enough staff. They don't have enough time, and people are on backlogs and they're on waiting lists and all this kind of stuff. So we're trying, as I said at the very beginning, small enough to find solutions, but big enough to deliver on them. We're looking at this national bank option where we can bring lots and lots of people who've potentially got clinical qualifications. They're retired, they have time on their hands, who would be willing to help the NHS clear some of the backlog, which up until now has all been something like you leave, you retire. Hopefully we're going to encourage people to leave the NHS, retire a little bit, but still help in some way. So that's quite exciting.
Sounds like sounds like a really good opportunity, that actually. Really exciting.
Yeah, I think as well, NHS doesn't have an easy ride, so any bit to help them out is a great thing to do for sure.
Absolutely. That's it. All the rest of the stuff we'll carry on and continue to grow, continue to find opportunities, try some, win some, fail, but continue to take, as this particular podcast is related to, take security very seriously.
Yeah.
And that's using all the tools. I suppose one last thing, do all the staff training as well, and make sure your staff know
that's a big thing.
That risks exist. We have actually done a very good job of ensuring that all of our staff know that there are risks out there, and every single person stands on to attention when they receive emails with links. Even if they were expecting it, they go, should I click on that? Go, do you know what? I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Wait for something to be introduced. So it's good. It's going to be exciting. We're ready to start. I'm not going to say winding down for Christmas. We never do. But start looking forward to Christmas.
Yeah.
And then run into 2025 with lots of exciting things in front of us. And undoubtedly, more moles will keep popping up.
We get wacky.
That's the plan. Wonderful.
Amazing. Yeah, that wraps it up. Yeah, thank you so much, man. It's been nice speaking to you. And I think all the points I made about vulnerability management are completely relevant. How bigger people stick to that, they should have no problems